You know, I sat at this table for months as the build-up to war, criticizing the case for the war, believing it was never at all based upon the weapons of mass destruction case. And now the vice president has made my point. He said it didn't matter whether they had stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. The war was still justified by his lights. Do you believe, Frank, and you know the inside of the White House, do you believe Dick Cheney supported a war resolution, supported the war in Iraq, which has cost us 4,000 troops and has cost us 30,000 wounded and tens of thousands of casualties over there? Do you believe that the war had anything to do with his belief that that country had weapons of mass destruction stockpiled? Because he says it didn't. He's admitting that they didn't have to have stockpiles for him to believe the war was justified. That's what's astounding, and I'm surprised by it.
Let's be clear. The danger represented by vast quantities of aging VX or other chemical agents sitting in artillery shells, I think, was less of a problem than the kind of agent that was in those laboratories that was being prepared to be put into aerosol cans to kill people here and in Europe. That's the sort of thing that we didn't know until after we liberated the place. We now know, and I have to tell you that while the costs have been high, I believe the costs of inaction would have been inordinately higher, and that would have made us all wish we had taken the step President Bush and Dick Cheney courageously did at a time, on the basis, by the way, of the same information that everybody else had. The Democrats had, the foreign intelligence services had, and everybody agreed was the authentic documentation.
At the time of the invasion, they were not producing the sort of weaponry that Frank is describing here.
We didn't know that at the time.
Wait a second. You didn't know that, but that's the truth. That wasn't happening. You can't say we invaded them because we didn't know what they were not doing.
We did it on the basis of the information available at the time.
And they'd say it doesn't matter. I mean,
let me ask you, Frank, does it bother you that the American people now overwhelmingly, by about a three-quarters vote, now believe that the war was wrong, it wasn't justified?
Of course.
And now it seems like their instincts seem to be correct, and their wisdom, based upon this information we have now, that the case made for war was really dishonest. That the real reason for it was not that we believed that we were fighting the war because of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We were against the war because we didn't like the other guy and we wanted to get him out of power. That was the real reason.
No, the real reason was we thought he constituted a mortal threat to the American people, and prophylactic action was necessary.
And
I think the American people should be delighted
you believe a mortal threat to the United States, an existential, a strategic threat to the United States. No. This guy over in Iraq is still a threat to the United States. Where do you get this from? We can't find the weapons. We can't find the rationale.
Chris, they could be a mortal threat.
What do you mean? Where do you get these words from? Mortal threat.
You kill American people. You kill American people, that's a mortal threat to the people you're killing. Okay. I'm not saying it's existential.
But listen, let's go with the other words. What about the mushroom cloud?
If you know anything about biological agents, you know that they can inflict incalculable damage.
Let me tell you, you guys sold the war as a nuclear threat to the United States. A nuclear weapon was going to be delivered by a nuclear delivery device. It was going to be a vehicle. It was going to take the weapon and to drop it here. You sold every trick you could to get us in this war, and now you're backpedaling. And I do find it astounding that the Vice President of the United States is admitting, well, that's how I feel, Frank.
Yeah, but let me just tell you, I think you're dead wrong.
4,000 people are dead because of the way you feel.
There are 4,000 people dead.
You're wrong about this because you don't even seem to care that your facts were wrong.
Chris, there are 4,000 people.
You admit your facts were wrong and it doesn't bother you.
I keep.
May I just state my position rather than you state it for me, Chris? May I do that?
No, you.
My position is it is regrettable that any Americans died. It is regrettable that they had to die, but I believe they did have to die. The threat we did know about was the chemical capability that Saddam Hussein had used against his own people. The potential for biological agents were real. There was evidence that there was an ongoing nuclear program. We had been surprised at how far advanced it was before. The danger was inaction could have resulted in the death of a great many more Americans than 4,000.
Let's get the facts.
And that's the reason I'm still delighted that we did what we did.
What happened between the danger and the genocidal act by Saddam Hussein against the Kurds occurred before the first Iraq war. We fought that war. We threw them out of Kuwait. We ended that war. Now you're going back to an incident, a horrible incident that occurred before the first Iraq war that justify the second Iraq war. It makes no sense sequentially or logically, and the American people don't buy it, Frank. And now the Vice President has admitted that he would have fought the war absent his main case. That's in his main case, which was nuclear weapons.
Yes. The logic is pretty clear.
But wait a second, Frank. On nuclear weapons, it's important to remember there were indeed nuclear inspectors, and they had already said by the time the invasion started that they had found no evidence to back up the claim that there was even an ongoing nuclear program. In fact, the key issue you might remember were those aluminum tubes.
Right.
Cheney talked about them on Meet the Press. The mushroom cloud was often done in reference to that. You know, you go back and read the book that I wrote with Mike Isikoff, Hubris, and we go throughout, A through Z. The tubes, the best experts in the government, the guys who worked in the Department of Energy nuclear labs, all said they're not for nuclear weapons. There was one analyst in the CIA, and Condi Rice and Dick Cheney, all they had to do was read the intelligence, look at stories in the Washington Post, to know that they had no case on the nuclear front.
There were disagreements at the time, David, and hindsight is 2020. The difference that I would have with you...
No, I'm talking about what was happening at the time, Frank.
No, but at the time, there were nuclear inspectors looking for Saddam Hussein's nuclear program before Desert Storm. They didn't find anything then. They were surprised afterwards that he had a bomb that was a year away from being able to be used. That's the reality.
David Corn, thank you.
That's the logic of where this all fits together, Chris.
I don't think this debate is over, Frank, but thank you. Merry Christmas, buddy, and Happy New Year. I do think it's stunning what the Vice President said the other day, because many people supported the Iraq War. I mean, people in the middle supported this war because they believed America was threatened by a possible nuclear attack from Saddam Hussein. I believe that was the reason that sold the war to the middle of the country politically. And now to step back and say, well, it didn't matter. They didn't have any nuclear weapons over there. They didn't have nuclear stockpiles. It didn't matter, Chris. Yes.
No, they're not.
The Vice President said we would have fought the war otherwise. We would have fought the war. You know,
that's not what the
capability is not the case that was made. It was presence of stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. That was the case made by the leaders of this country.
Which was the case at the time.
Now,
and you were wrong.
And
the fact is,
the capability was there. That's what we were right about.
The utter shamelessness of Dick Cheney as our Vice President not to admit he made a major mistake that caused a war that wouldn't otherwise be justified by the lights of the American people is profound. That's why I brought it tonight.